In the hush before memory, before scripture was inked upon skin and stone, there was only breath and pulse, divine and unmeasured. The Garden of Eden bloomed not just with life, but with intention. Its vines curled like fingers of the Maker, each leaf trembling under the weight of meaning. The air was not air, but essence. The rivers ran not only with water, but with light. This was not a place of innocence, but of design, sacred, fragrant, ancient beyond naming. It was here, in this beginning before beginnings, that balance was attempted. Not balance of good and evil, for such dualities had not yet been born, but of creation itself, masculine and feminine, earth and sky, flame and water, and in the echoing heart of Eden, formed not from bone, but from the same sacred clay as her counterpart, arose Lilith. No rib bound her, no silence defined her. She opened her eyes not in awe, but in knowing. The divine breath that animated her did not humble her, it burned within her like a song waiting to be sung. Before Eve, before fall, before the stories were softened and rewritten, there was Lilith, the first woman, equal to man, and yet never his mirror. The garden whispered her name like a forbidden hymn. She walked among serpents unafraid. She bathed naked beneath fig leaves heavy with promise. The wind moved when she beckoned it, and the earth pulsed beneath her feet. Animals bowed without command. Fruit ripened in her hand. She was not subordinate. She was sovereign. The stories you've been told, of Eden's innocence, of Adam's loneliness, of a woman gifted to him as companion, are echoes of an edited truth. The first union was not one of simplicity or peace. It was a meeting of forces, primal, sensual, and wild. Lilith did not submit, and that, above all, is why she was cast out of the myth. The Creator had shaped her, yes, but not for obedience. She was not molded to lie beneath or behind. She did not speak in whispers. Her voice was clear, her desire unapologetic. She did not ask to belong. She was. Yet the garden was not a place of questions. It was a place of order. And Lilith was the tremor in the pattern. It was not sin that marked her. It was refusal. Refusal to be defined by a man's needs. Refusal to bend to command when her soul burned with equal fire. Refusal to be less when she knew she was born from the same breath, the same dust, the same divine flame. And so began the friction, not between good and evil, but between expectation and essence. Adam, who sought harmony through hierarchy, found in Lilith something unsettling. She did not worship. She did not obey. When he reached for her, she reached back, but not to be taken. She touched with intention, kissed with demand, moved with rhythm that matched and challenged his own. The union was not gentle. It was not ordered. It was not what the heavens had decreed. And so, the sacred turned scandalous. When Lilith spoke the ineffable name, one only angels dared utter, she vanished, not with shame, but with sovereignty. She did not fall. She fled, winged and radiant, into the night. Not a punishment, but a becoming. Not exile, but escape. And in her absence, the silence was rewritten. The scribes would later brand her as seductress, as demon, as devourer of infants and men. Her name would be laced with fear, uttered only in warning, but listen closely, and you'll hear the older tone, the ancient pulse, the forgotten truth beneath the curse. Lilith was not the first sinner. She was the first woman who would not be owned. In the deserts she grew wild. In the shadows she gathered strength. She took lovers not from duty, but desire. She spoke to serpents, to stars, to forgotten gods. Her body no longer a vessel, but a weapon, a sanctuary, a hymn. And still she was blamed for storms, for barren wombs, for nocturnal ecstasies unblessed by holy men. Yet in secret, many women whispered her name into mirrors. They lit candles with trembling fingers and carved sigils into wood and skin. They dreamed of wings, of fire, of a voice that did not beg but commanded. For Lilith is not just a myth, she is a mirror. A memory of power before shame. A shadow cast by a flame too bright to be tamed. She is the breath you hold when desire overtakes you, the heat in your chest when you say no and mean it, the rhythm in your hips when you move without apology, the hunger in your eyes when you remember who you were before they told you what to be. The myth, you see, was never meant to be told. It was meant to be felt. And now, as you step into this story, understand, this is not a tale of evil or fall. It is the unraveling of a truth too fierce for Eden. A garden that could not hold her, a God who could not break her, a man who could not keep her. This is the myth of Lilith, the first breath of defiance, the first blush of rebellion, the first woman who knew her worth and chose freedom over paradise. And once you know her story, you will never forget the shape of her absence, or the echo of her wings in your dreams. She was born of dust, yes, but not the passive dust that waits to be shaped. Lilith was made of dust that danced in the divine breath, that sparked in the light between stars. Her form rose not from bone, but from balance, an equal measure of shadow and flame, of stillness and song. She did not awaken, she remembered. From the first moment her limbs unfolded, she moved with purpose. Her eyes, dark as ancient wells, did not search for approval, they claimed. She bore no shame in her nakedness, for her body was not made to be hidden. It was a temple, a battlefield, a garden all its own. Her breath was slow and full, shaped not by fear, but by knowing. Knowing she was whole, knowing she was not a piece, but a beginning. Lilith was the kind of beauty that did not invite possession. She was not delicate. She did not yield like a flower.
She bloomed like wildfire, dangerous, dazzling, untamed. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the low hum of thunder before a storm. Her touch did not tremble, it demanded recognition. Her desires were not hidden, they pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. And in the garden there was Adam. Born of the same earth, raised in the same breath, he was the first man, but not yet whole. Strong, curious, blessed with the power to name all things, he looked upon the world with wonder and order. His mind longed for structure, for clarity. And when he beheld Lilith, he saw not just a companion, but a mystery. A fire he could not hold in his hands without being burned. At first he reached for her with awe. She returned his gaze without lowering her own. They touched, not with innocence, but with need. And in their joining there was a hunger deeper than the garden's silence. Yet what stirred between them was not harmony, it was a challenge. Lilith would not lie beneath him, not in body nor in spirit. They were equal in flesh, in breath, in divine spark, and she reminded him of it, daily, nightly, with lips that questioned and hips that defied. When he pressed, she pressed back. When he commanded, she laughed. Their moments of closeness were not soft, they were electric. Clashing waves, crashing thunder, tongues of flame licking at the base of the divine.
Adam, who had never known resistance, grew uneasy in her presence. He desired her, but her defiance bruised his pride. Her voice unsettled his certainty. She did not need him. She chose him, and only when her desire aligned with his. She did not ask to be touched. She offered. And when he reached without reverence, she withdrew, like the moon into cloud. He had never known a woman who saw herself as complete without him. She unnerved him, not through cruelty, but through clarity. Her gaze peeled back the surface of him, down to the soft, uncertain core he had not yet faced. In her presence, he was not master, not creator, not center. He was a man confronted by his equal, and he did not know what to do with that truth. And above them, watching with eyes that do not blink, was the Creator. The one who had breathed them both into being, the one who carved stars into place and poured oceans into their beds. But even the divine seeks order, and Lilith's wildness was disorder given flesh. Where Adam asked, Lilith demanded. Where Adam bowed, Lilith stood. Where Adam accepted, Lilith questioned. It was not her beauty that offended, nor her sensuality. It was her refusal. Her spine did not bend even before God. She would not be reshaped to fit a man's hand. She would not be named as lesser even by the voice that thundered from heaven. So the angels came, messengers cloaked in righteousness, carrying commands like blades. They did not speak to her with kindness, they spoke with decree. They warned, they threatened. They called her wicked, unruly, ungrateful. They told her she belonged to Adam, that the garden had rules and she had broken them. But Lilith laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but one of disbelief, a sound of wings unbinding, of chains crumbling to dust. I was not made to kneel. I was made to burn. And so the tension crystallized.
between freedom and obedience, between passion and purity, between a God who desired harmony and a woman who desired truth.
Adam pleaded. He did not hate her. He feared her, and feared what she awakened in him. She showed him not only his desire, but his limits, the soft parts he had never touched, the yearning he could not name. She called to something deeper than flesh, something he could not control. But Lilith would not bind her voice to please a trembling heart. She was not made to fill the empty space beside a man. She was made to claim space of her own. She did not ask to be seen as holy. She knew herself to be sacred, whether adorned or accused, embraced or cast out. Her sanctity was not bestowed. It was inherent. The garden began to tighten. Vines curled like judgment. Fruit rotted on the branch. The rivers grew still. Even the silence felt heavy. Something ancient was shifting, an energy, a heartbeat that the world could not contain. It was not evil that stirred, but awakening. A woman awakening to the truth of herself, to the weight of her wings, to the echo of the void that called her name. And what of the divine? God in this tale is not villain nor hero, but a force of design, a force that desires symmetry. Yet Lilith was not symmetrical. She was curved in spirit, wild in essence. Her presence defied the blueprint. She was the note that didn't fit the song. And rather than silence herself, she chose to leave the stage. Not banished, gone by will. The opposing forces did not kill her. They could not. They only branded her as wrong to protect the myth of peace. But those who remember her truly, those who see her not as a demon, but as a mirror, know the truth. Lilith was the first to choose self over comfort, fire over safety, freedom over Eden. Even now, in whispers passed between women and in shadows cast by candlelight, her name stirs something deep and forbidden. Not a warning, a reminder. She was not made to serve. She was made to feel, to know, to choose. And when she walked away, the stars blinked in mourning, because something divine had left the garden, never to return the same. She became not woman, not wife, but legend, not tamed, not erased, not forgotten.
It began not with a scream, but with a whisper. A soft defiance breathed between parted lips, curled beneath the canopy of stars. A wordless resistance woven into the way Lilith's body moved against Adam's, neither yielding nor asking. She did not flinch from his touch, but neither did she melt beneath it. Her skin met his as flame meets air, hungry, equal, demanding. In the stillness of Eden's night, they became tangled in flesh and breath. There, in the hush between sacred syllables and primal rhythms, the truth of them revealed itself. Adam did not want a partner. He wanted a mirror that bowed. He wanted pleasure that obeyed. But Lilith did not bend, not when he pressed his wheat upon her, not when he whispered the divine name with possessiveness in his voice, not even when the earth itself seemed to hold its breath, watching. She would not lie beneath him. "Why should I be lower?" she asked, eyes glinting like obsidian in moonlight, "when we were made the same." There was no venom in her voice, only certainty. Yet to Adam the question struck like a blade. He had never been challenged in this way, not by nature, not by the beasts, not by the silent trees that bowed when he named them. But Lilith would not be named like the others. She was not something to be catalogued. She was a force to be faced. He tried to coax her, to charm her into compliance. He brought her pomegranates and poems, laid petals beneath her feet. But she only smiled, amused, untouched by gestures that sought to tame what was wild. Desire burned between them, but it was not soft. It was sharp, erotic in its resistance. Every kiss a question, every touch a test. Their bodies collided like storms at sea, hungry for something neither fully understood. He sought to master her, she sought to meet him. But parity was mistaken for rebellion in a world designed for obedience. And so the garden grew restless. Its perfection trembled. The river that once hummed with divine harmony now shivered with tension. Vines grew tangled where they once spiraled in sacred order. The fruit, once bursting with sweetness, darkened. Lilith's refusal echoed beyond flesh.
In every act of defiance, she unraveled the quiet symmetry Eden demanded. She would not moan softly to please him. She would not still her voice when she cried out in her own rhythm. She would not be quieted, not in the dark, not in the day. Adam, in his longing, reached not for understanding, but for control. He spoke the words he believed would make her yield. He invoked the name. He pressed her shoulders down, gently at first, then with growing frustration. But Lilith, fierce and unafraid, rose beneath him, eyes burning. "No," she said, "not with hate, but with fire. No, with the finality of stone. No, with the knowing of one who has tasted freedom and will not return to hunger." This was not the sin they feared. It was the truth they tried to bury. That a woman who owns her body is dangerous. That a woman who speaks her desire is powerful. That a woman who will not be mastered cannot be kept. Adam recoiled. In that moment he saw not a partner, but something other. Too wild, too much, too free. He went to the Creator with trembling lips and a wounded pride. "She does not obey," he said.
She refuses her place. The sky darkened in response. The clouds folded in. The voice of the divine did not thunder, it whispered. And in that whisper came the law. A woman who denies divine order must be corrected or cast out. Lilith, summoned by the voice that once shaped her, stood unflinching. "Submit," the angels said, golden and terrible, their wings slicing the air. She looked at them not in fear, but in sorrow. For she had loved Eden in her way. She had danced beneath its stars, bathed in its rivers, laughed among its branches. But love was not enough, not if it came with a collar. And so she spoke the ineffable name, the one only the archangels knew, the one wrapped in silence, the one hidden in the folds of the cosmos. She spoke it not in anger, but in release. And in that moment, she flew. Wings of shadow and flame burst from her back, wings that had not existed until that instant, until her refusal became her becoming. The garden screamed. Adam fell to his knees. The angels recoiled, and God, vast and still, said nothing, for the story had changed. Lilith soared beyond Eden's borders, through thorn and wind, into the barren lands where no name had yet been spoken. She was alone, but not lost. The desert welcomed her. The shadows recognized her. The night whispered to her as an equal. In her flight, she wept, not for Adam, but for the cost of truth. She did not regret her choice, but oh, how the ache lived in her bones. Exile was not silence, it was a cleansing. Exile was not punishment, it was becoming. She found caves carved by ancient winds and sang her pain into their hollows. She pressed her bare body to stone and felt it echo her warmth. She wept and laughed and touched herself, not with shame, but with reverence. Her pleasure was now her own, unseen, unmeasured, and holy. And Eden, it reshaped itself to forget her. The Creator formed another from Adam's rib, smaller, quieter, compliant. A revision, not a creation. A balm to heal a wound they refused to understand. But the soil still remembered. And when the wind rustled the trees, it sometimes whispered her name. Lilith, she who would not kneel, she who left paradise to find herself, she who chose exile over erasure. But the world was not done punishing her. They called her names: succubus, witch, demoness. They blamed her for dead infants, for lustful dreams, for wandering souls. They tried to stitch her into every shadow as a warning. But in secret, some listened, and in longing, some followed. For Lilith had not been destroyed. only freed. And the garden, once so full of harmony, now pulsed with a quiet grief, for it had lost something irreplaceable, the voice of the untamed feminine, the divine made wild, the truth that would not be tamed.
She flew, not with the grace of an angel, nor the stillness of a prayer. She flew like a storm unchained, naked, burning, wings unfurling from flesh that had never known such breadth. The sound of them tearing free was not gentle. It was the cry of the first wound, the moan of skin rebelling against the shape it had been told to hold. Wings of ash and ember, made not of feathers, but of memory and defiance. Every beat of those dark, beautiful wings was a scream, a release, a spell. The garden fell away behind her, shrinking into silence, into order, into the smallness it had always tried to place upon her shoulders. The trees bowed their heads, the river stilled, even the fruit stopped growing. Eden did not mourn her, but the air, it remembered her breath. And the soil, it still held her footprints pressed deep into its bones. Above her, the stars, cold, bright, watching. Below her, the desert, empty, vast, waiting. She fell into it, into the nothingness that promised no path, no comfort, no hand to hold. And there, in the heart of the void, Lilith became something else. She wept, yes, but not in defeat. Her tears carved rivers through the dust, glistening in moonlight that came not from above, but from within her. She bled, not from wounds, but from the sacred tearing of self apart from the cage. Her blood sank into the earth, black and hot and humming. From it grew thorns, from it rose heat, from it came songs, old and fierce, sung in no tongue known to man. Her cries echoed into the spaces where no voice had ever touched. She screamed and kissed and danced and trembled. She touched herself with the reverence no God had ever given her. She whispered her own name into the wind again and again until it answered back. Lilith, Lilith, Lilith. She became the dark between stars. She became the ache beneath desire. She became the thing that lives in mirrors, watching, waiting, waking. They would say she became a monster. But the truth was this: she became whole.
No longer a woman shaped to please, nor a vessel hollowed by expectation. She shed her obedience like dead skin. She tore out the bones of silence they had planted in her. She painted her body with her own hands, lines of ash and blood across her chest, her belly, her thighs, until she became sacred again, until she remembered that she always had been. The desert welcomed her, not as queen, not as goddess, but as equal. The sand did not ask her to change. The wind did not flinch at her voice. The sun touched her without burning. And in the deep hours of night, when all things whispered their truths to the stars, Lilith sang her sorrow to the moon. She sang of Adam, not with hate, but longing, not for his body, but for what could have been, a union of equals, a love without leash. She missed him, but she would never return. Even as loneliness coiled like smoke through her ribs, even as memories slid like sweat down her back, she stood tall in her grief. She lit a fire from her own bones and warmed herself beside it. She howled, she laughed, she bled into the sand and called it holy. From her pain came transformation. She grew eyes in the dark, eyes that could see lies hiding in light. She grew teeth beneath her tongue, sharp and gleaming, to cut through honeyed chains. She grew a second heart, beating not for another, but for herself. And they feared her for it. They called her a demon, not because she devoured, but because she refused to be devoured. They whispered that she stole children, that she corrupted men, that she seduced innocence. But it was never innocence she wanted. It was truth. It was freedom. It was the right to want without apology. Lilith became a myth wrapped in shame, a shadow used to scare, but her power pulsed beneath every warning. Mothers feared her, but daughters dreamt of her. Men cursed her, but kissed women who carried her fire. Priests denied her, but turned their heads when desire undid their prayers. She was the first woman to leave, and so she became every woman who dares to say no. No to silence, no to submission, no to being broken into shape. And yet, Lilith did not close her heart. Even in the vast desert, even among the winds that never stopped moaning, she still held within her the warmth of longing. Not for Eden, but for a world where she would not have to choose between love and self. In the nights when the moon was full, she would rise above the sand, her wings spread wide, her body gleaming with sweat and dust, her eyes catching starlight like flame. She would speak to the dark. I am not fallen. I am risen. I am not cursed. I am crowned. I am not yours. I am mine. And in that truth she found her ecstasy. Not the soft pleasure of Eden's scripted touch, but the raw, aching bliss of reclamation, of becoming, of being. The divine had tried to shape her, but she shaped herself. She carved new laws into her skin. She wrote scripture with her movements. She blessed the wild things, kissed the mouths of serpents, bathed in silence until even silence obeyed her. She did not ask for worship, but those who saw her in dreams could not help but fall to their knees, not out of fear, but recognition. Because in her they saw the echo of a self they had buried. Lilith was no longer merely woman. She was myth. She was mirror. She was flame in human form. And as her wings beat against the desert winds, the stars shifted. The world tilted. And every time someone refused to be broken, somewhere far off, she smiled.
Eden did not heal. In Lilith's absence, The garden grew quieter, but not in peace. It was a brittle silence, like the hush that falls after the breaking of glass. The trees still bore fruit, but the sweetness tasted hollow. The rivers still ran, but their music lacked harmony. The sun rose and set, but it no longer warmed the skin with the same gentle touch. Something sacred had been torn from its soil. The balance, once thought divine, was fractured, exposed. Without Lilith, Eden was orderly, obedient, and incomplete. Adam walked its pathways alone, surrounded by perfection and plagued by unrest. The woman who now walked beside him, Eve, born of his rib, was gentle, silent, kind. Her smile with lowered eyes and offered no resistance. Her love was shaped like a mirror, reflecting back his desires without challenge. But in the dead hours of night, Adam could not forget the other, Lilith. He saw her in the wind, its fierce pull at his garments. He heard her in the rustle of leaves, whispers that dared him to remember. He felt her in his sleep, pressing into him like a fire he could never tame. He had asked for order and received it, but he longed deeply, secretly, for the storm. And while Adam traced familiar footsteps in a garden that never changed, Lilith became movement itself. She walked between worlds, no longer tethered to creation's first cage, neither fully spirit nor flesh, neither angel nor beast. She was reborn not in softness, but in flame. Her body, once shaped to please, now moved through dreams and shadows with its own rhythm, its own law. In some lands, they called her Demon, a name sharpened by fear. She was blamed for miscarriages and stillbirths, for sudden lusts and untamed thoughts. Mothers whispered charms at night to ward her away. Men awoke from fevered dreams, hearts pounding, hands trembling, unable to shake the vision of a woman with black eyes and blood-warm skin, pressing into them, whispering truths they couldn't bear to face.
They cursed her, but their curses could not reach her, because Lilith no longer dwelled in places where curses held power. In other lands, her name was sung. Goddess, they called her, Mother of Night, Lady of the Desert Wind, the one who does not bow. Women drew her symbols in ash on their thighs. They lit fires in caves and called her name with voices raw and wild. Not in prayer, but in solidarity. She became the embodiment of refusal, of sacred rage, of untamed sensuality, of the power that lies in knowing one's worth. In brothels, they honored her. In temples, they feared her. In stories, they twisted her. But she was not made for clarity. She was made to stand at the edge of every known thing, between birth and death, between desire and shame, between holiness and heresy. She walked between realms. At dusk, she passed through windows, slipping into bedsides and minds, planting seeds of unrest in the obedient. At dawn, She vanished into sand and myth, leaving behind only the echo of wings and the scent of something forbidden. She became legend, a woman whose name could not be spoken without consequence, a presence that unraveled certainty, a force that pulsed beneath the surface of every quiet, submissive life. And even the angels, those perfect messengers of divine order, watched her with unease. She had defied them and survived. She had spoken the ineffable name. She had left the garden untouched by punishment. What could be more terrifying than that? In hidden corners of the earth, altars rose in her honor, not of gold, but of bone and smoke. Offerings were made not to placate her, but to join her. For those who had been cast aside, those who had been silenced, those who had tasted the bitterness of being made small, Lilith was salvation.
She was not kind. She was not safe, but she was true. And truth, in its rawest form, is always holy. She took no throne, she built no kingdom, but she ruled just the same, through whispers, through winds, through the trembling hands of those who reached for more than what they were told they deserved. Sometimes she appeared at crossroads, to the lost, to the broken, to the bold, a shadow beneath the moonlight, a woman cloaked in hair like night, eyes like eclipses, mouth red with remembrance. She offered no promises, only the question, will you choose yourself? And those who answered yes, those who turned from the garden gates, felt her kiss in their blood for the rest of their lives. Still, she mourned, not for Eden, but for the world's forgetting, for the centuries that buried her beneath shame, for the mouths that spat her name without knowing its weight. She mourned for the women who folded themselves small, for the men who feared softness, for the children who would never know a creation story where the first woman was not a warning, but a revelation. Lilith now was not what she once was, but she was more. Not a woman, not a demon, not a goddess. Something in between, something beyond, a flame without source, a breath without lungs, a name without leash. She had become myth, yes, but more than that, she had become possibility. And Eden? It continued, ordered, predictable, safe. But beneath its soil, her roots still pulsed, and in the wind that passed through its trees, her voice still whispered, I was here. I am still here. You cannot forget what was never yours to erase.
What does it truly mean to be free? This question hums beneath every pulse of Lilith's story, as if it is a secret waiting to be uncovered in the deepest shadows of the soul. To speak it aloud is to invite 1,000 voices, some tender, some fierce, and 1,000 silences where words fail. Lilith's tale does not offer comfort in simple morals or tidy lessons. It is a living riddle spun from shadow and flame, whispered on the edges of time where certainty fades and only desire remains. She was once a woman who dared to say no. No to silence, no to submission,
node to the soft, invisible chains that sought to bind her body, her voice, her spirit. But what if that refusal was not only rebellion? What if it was a profound act of love? Not the love that demands sacrifice or quiet obedience, love that diminishes and silences, but a fierce, wild love that burns with the hunger to be fully seen, fully felt, fully alive. A love that chooses selfhood over erasure, fullness over conformity. Lilith loved herself first. In that love, she found a power unlike any other. A power not granted by gods or angels, but forged in the solitude of exile, the ache of loneliness, and the desperate joy of becoming whole in spite of all that sought to erase her. What then is power? Is it control over others, dominance or submission of wills? Or is power something deeper, more intimate, a reclaiming of the self, a refusal to be diminished by the world's narrow definitions? Lilith's power is the power to exist without apology, to speak without fear, to desire without shame.
And what of the feminine? Too often, femininity is defined by softness, submission, quiet beauty. But Lilith teaches us that the feminine is not one thing. It is many things all at once. It can be gentle as moonlight on skin, and fierce as desert storms. The sacred feminine is wild wind that uproots trees, the dark night that holds countless stars, the blood that flows unapologetic and deep. Lilith is the sacred feminine unshackled, both tenderness and terror, light and shadow, flesh and spirit entwined in an eternal dance. If we look beyond the surface, we see Lilith not as villain or victim, but as symbol. A symbol of the woman who refuses to be less than she is. A symbol of the soul that demands freedom at any cost. A symbol of the divine spark within each of us, waiting to be kindled. She is the question whispered in every quiet place where desire meets fear. Who will you be when no one is watching? She is the echo in the heart that refuses to stop beating against oppression, against erasure, against the dulling of the flame. Lilith's story invites us to reconsider the stories we tell ourselves and those imposed upon us. It asks, what parts of ourselves have we hidden away because they did not fit the mold? What truths have been silenced in the name of peace or order? What fires have we buried beneath layers of fear or shame? More urgently, it asks, what would happen if we dared to let those fires burn freely? What if we lived with the courage to say no when the world demands a yes? What if we embraced the messy, wild power of our desires, our bodies, our voices, our spirits, without shame or apology? Lilith teaches that freedom is never given. It is seized. It is carved from silence, forged in the dark moments when the world demands obedience. But freedom is also joy. Joy in movement unchained. Joy in pleasure unashamed. Joy in existence fully claimed.
To live like Lilith is to live as a paradox, both shadow and light, exile and home, loss and transcendence. She is the woman who walks through fire and emerges unburned, the woman who sings her own name even when the world calls her demon, the woman who is her own refuge and her own storm. Her story is an invitation to all who feel fragmented or confined to stand fierce and whole. And as we close this chapter, a vision unfolds. A night sky thick with stars, a desert wind carrying a single voice, soft yet fierce, whispering through the darkness, I am here. I was never yours to tame. That voice is Lilith's legacy, her myth, her gift. It lingers, not as a warning, but as an invitation to awaken, to resist, to love ourselves fiercely without apology, to remember that within each of us burns a flame that no cage can hold, and that flame, wild, sacred, eternal, is our truest home. But the reflection does not end here, for Lilith's story challenges us to see freedom not only as a personal triumph, but as a collective awakening. How many voices have been silenced in the name of order? How many lives shaped by fear of their own power? How many desires buried beneath layers of shame? Her myth asks us to look beyond surface fears and see the hunger beneath, our hunger for authenticity, for recognition, for sacred connection. Lilith's exile is not just hers, it is the exile of every soul forced to hide the fullness of its being. When society demands conformity, it fractures us. It teaches us to split our desires from our dignity, our bodies from our spirits, our minds from our hearts. But Lilith shows us the way back to wholeness. She is the wild thread woven through the fabric of human history, the whisper beneath the roar of civilization that insists we be small, silent, compliant. To remember Lilith is to remember the power of refusal, the power to say no to what diminishes us, to claim our bodies as sacred, to honor our desires as divine. Her story resonates deeply because it touches something universal and eternal. The struggle to be free, to be loved fully, to be seen as whole. She reminds us that love is not always gentle, that power is not always soft, that freedom is not always peaceful.
And that is the beauty of her myth. It is not a story that comforts. It is a story that awakens. It does not offer answers. It offers a mirror. And in that mirror we see ourselves, the light and the shadow, the flesh and the spirit, the exile and the home. We see the wildfire that burns within us all. So as this tale draws to a close, the question remains, will you answer Lilith's call? Will you dare to stand in your own flame, fierce and unashamed? Will you speak your truth, even if it shatters the silence? Will you love yourself fully and wildly, without apology? For in that answer lies the path to freedom. Lilith's story does not end with exile or fear. It continues in every breath taken by those who refuse to be less than themselves. She is no longer just a myth of the past. She is the pulse beneath our feet, the breath in our lungs, the fire in our veins. She is the possibility of living beyond the limits imposed by fear, shame, or tradition. And when you feel lost, silenced, or small, remember, Lilith waits in the shadows, wings spread wide, whispering in the wind, calling you home. I was never yours to tame. I am the flame you carry. I am the freedom you seek.